Hey folks, how's it going? My name is Lexi and I really like tabletop games. I like them so much that we get together once a week, every week, here at the gaming table and review one. If that sounds interesting to you, I encourage you to press subscribe and keep watching today's video. Today we are taking a look at a game from Free League Publishing. I've been a fan of a couple of their games in the past and others haven't so much been my speed. So it'd be really interesting to see what I think of today's game. I happen to be really lucky to have a friend who so generously was willing to lend me a copy so I could do my review today. This is one of Free League's earlier games, so it's a bit of an interesting one to take a look at, especially considering how many games they are making now. So let's take a look at Symbaorum. This game takes its name from an ancient temple, shrouded in a dark forest, where few venture. Most settlements are around the edge of this forest. This, however, wasn't always the case. After a war against dark forces, the Queen of the Albertor decided to pick up the entire nation and move it. This move hasn't come without trouble, as there were tribes of barbarians living in the area already. The settlement of the area isn't framed as a straightforward colonization. The Queen frames it as a reconquest of ancestral ancient lands. Of course, the reality of the situation makes it pretty clear that this is a colonial conquest. Many of the barbarian tribes have either been defeated or convinced into a truce to join the kingdom, or at the very least live peacefully alongside it. The backdrop for all this, the Dark Forest, is known as the Davulcar, and it is where adventurers go to seek their fortune. I think if you are playing a game of Symbaorum, the place that has the most obvious appeal is the forest. Interestingly, the setting section of the manual spends more time on the various settlements around the forest rather than just the forest itself. This does feel perhaps a little odd to me. As a player, I would be racing to the forest for adventure of any kind. Perhaps though, this choice to give all these settlements a turn in the spotlight would make this game really appealing to anyone who's looking for a game set in a city with plenty of cut purses or political intrigue. There's plenty of interesting and weird things happening in the different settlements to check out. Don't get me wrong. It's just that a dark, spooky, scary forest with an ancient temple just happens to be right up my alley, and it makes me itch for a good dungeon crawl. I do really love some of the little details about the world I do love some of those small details that are included in this manual about the world of Symbaorum. In every settlement, there's a few NPCs and organizations you can meet and interesting locations to visit. One of my favorite details recorded about one of the settlements is that there is a licensing office there for people to go adventuring into the Davulcar. There are different licenses sold based on the number of people in a group, whether or not you have any extras like a horse and cart. And you can't just have one license for one adventurer to cover the whole group. No, it has to be a license to cover that size group. If you happen to be adventuring separately and you happen to run into another group of people who are adventuring with a different license, you better hope that you don't get caught traveling together by a patrol. There's a lot of detail included in the book for Symbaorum. I think if you are interested in creating your own world, the amount of content dedicated to the setting in this manual might be a bit of a turn off versus a turn on. For myself personally, I do really love the setting, and I think it would be a great one to play in. Perhaps every so often I would have appreciated a couple of dot points to summarize some information about a settlement. Sometimes it was hard to know whether or not I really wanted to read everything in detail. I like that this game has a bit of a darker fantasy setting. Sure, it's not gore and grim dark, but there definitely seems to be an overcast sky wherever you walk. For most tests, you want to roll a d20, then compare that result to a relevant number on your sheet. You're hoping to roll under. Depending on what your score is, you can actually subtract numbers from the die result, so that can improve your chances of succeeding. In this manual, you get 3 archetypes to choose from: The warrior, the rogue, the mystic. These are pretty classic fantasy archetypes for a tabletop role-playing game. These archetypes are more general templates that you can build your character with. There's options to customize or make them feel a bit more personal to you. In this game, when you're rolling a d20, you're mostly comparing it to your attribute score. In this game, there is accurate, cunning, discreet, persuasive, quick, resolute, strong, vigilant, and then a variety of secondary attribute scores that might be derived from these main scores. You get to choose a race for your character, traits, abilities, perhaps some mystical stuff and their equipment. The races you can choose to play with in this core book are human, changeling. These aren't the typical array of races that usually come with a fantasy tabletop role-playing game. There are the more traditional fantasy races of elves and dwarves around. They just don't seem to be as involved in the humans' business. The game master in this game never actually rolls dice. This in many ways makes running the game a lot easier. It's one less thing to worry about. On the other hand though, I think this could make some encounters a little bit boring. Say if you are writing a fight, a dagger can do a range of damage with a player character wielding it, but hand that same dagger to a bandit and it's always going to do a flat 4. For myself personally, that does take a little bit of the excitement out of the fight if you know every time someone lands a hit, it's going to be the same amount of damage. Interestingly, there are options to purchase the Symbaorum books with the mechanics for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition used instead of the roll under d20 system. I tend to be interested in systems that aren't Dungeons & Dragons, so I'm glad I got to have a look at this version of the game manual. If you're looking for a story-focused fantasy tabletop role-playing game with some darker elements, this could be a really fun option to pick up. The setting kind of yells dungeon crawler, but the mechanics are a little bit more straightforward. I don't think they'd appeal to someone who's looking for a super tactical role-playing game, but there's definitely something to be said for enjoying a dungeon crawl without having to count a number of squares you have to move. I love the art in this manual. It's dark and moody, and it definitely gives the impression that this kingdom is set itself up against the background of something darker and more ancient. The core rulebook for this game retails for around $50 US. If you like the sound of the setting, then I think you would really get a kick out of the game. If the setting doesn't appeal to you and you're just looking for a game manual where you can rip the system off and do your own thing, I don't quite think this is going to be the tabletop game for that. Symbaorum strikes me as the sort of game a group of players who love a bit of high fantasy could really get into. It's a little bit more towards grounded and a little bit darker, but there is an ancient temple out there for you to explore. Sure, you might get mud caked on your boots, but that's adventuring, right? But what do you think of Symbaorum? What do you think of the option to have the one game available with 2 different rule sets? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I also encourage you to like this video or perhaps even share it with a friend. Maybe they have some thoughts on Symbaorum they could share. If you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe and turn on notifications to find out when I upload next. I do have in my description a link to my Ko-Fi page if you would like to donate to this channel. All proceeds donated to this channel go directly back into making these episodes happen. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all well, and I look forward to seeing you next time at the gaming table. Bye!